My client's mother is confused, Your Honor. She can no longer be trusted with her own home. That is the sentence my daughter's lawyer said about me in a wood-paneled courtroom in Charleston, on a bright morning, with the light coming warm and gold through the tall windows, and I sat there in my navy suit with a closed manila folder resting flat on my lap, unopened, and never said a single word. I heard the small click of the metal clasp when my thumb touched it and let it go. My daughter Renata would not look at me. She kept her eyes on the polished table in front of her, and her attorney kept talking about a woman who forgot to eat and could not balance her own accounts and wandered her own house like a stranger in it. He was describing someone. He was not describing me. What Renata never knew, sitting there so sure of herself, was that I had already handed the court the one thing that actually decides these cases, and it was folded quietly in my lap, and I meant to let her keep talking until the moment came. My name is Margaret Coleman. I am 70 years old. I am a widow, and I have lived in the same house on Anson Street for 41 years. And you must understand something before I tell you the rest of it. I am not a confused woman. I have never once forgotten to eat. I know exactly what day it is, and exactly what my accounts hold down to the last penny, and I knew, that morning in that courtroom, precisely what my own child had tried to do to me, and precisely how it was going to end. But I let the lawyer finish. I sat with my hands folded on that folder, and I waited, because I had learned a long time ago that the loudest thing a woman can do is stay quiet until the right moment, and then not raise her voice at all. Before I take you back to how all of this began, let me ask you to do a small thing for me. If you have ever been counted out by someone who should have loved you better, click that like button and subscribe to this channel, because these are stories about women who were written off and were not finished at all. And I truly want to know, what would you have done, in my place, sitting in that courtroom while your own child told a judge you had lost your mind? Tell me in the comments. And do me one more kindness. Let me know where in the world you are watching from, and what time it is where you are right now. I read every single one of those, and it means more than you know to picture all of you out there, in your kitchens and your cars and your quiet late nights, listening to an old woman tell the truth. Now, let me carry you back to the beginning. I married Walter Coleman when I was 22 years old, and he was the finest man I ever knew, and I do not say that as a widow says it out of grief. I say it because it is a plain fact, same as the sun coming up is a fact. Walter walked a postal route for 36 years in this city, up and down these Charleston streets in a heat that will lay a strong man flat. And he never once complained about that heat, and he never once came home in a temper the rest of us had to pay for. He was a big man, broad in the shoulders, with hands that could have crushed a brick, and never did anything but gentle things. He called me his queen from the day he met me until the last morning I ever saw him alive, and I have carried that word inside me like a warm coal every day since. We bought that Anson Street house the year our first child was born. It is a narrow 2-story with a porch that wants painting every third spring, and a live oak in the small yard that was already old when we got there and is older now, and a kitchen where I have cooked more Sunday dinners than there are stars over the harbor. Walter and I paid off that house with a postal salary and my own wages from the school cafeteria, where I worked for 29 years, dollar by dollar, and there is not a board in that floor I do not know the sound of. My grandchildren learned to walk in that front room. I have measured their heights in pencil marks on the doorframe in the kitchen, and never in all this time have I painted over those marks. Not in all these years, and I never will. The morning Walter died, he was 62 years old, and it was 3 days before he was to retire. He had his uniform pressed and hung on the closet door for the little party they were going to throw him at the post office. got up before me, as he always did, and he was standing at the kitchen counter with his coffee, and he turned to say something to me, and his face changed, and he put one hand flat on the counter, and he sat down slowly in the kitchen chair like a man who was very tired, and he was gone before the ambulance turned onto our street. A heart, the doctor told me. A big heart that had simply done all it was ever going to do. I held his hand in that kitchen while the light came up over the yard, and I will give you the last full sentence that man ever said to me. For it is the thing that has held me upright through everything since, and you will need it later, as I needed it later. He had said it to me many times over the years, but he said it that last week too, perched on the side of our bed with his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He looked at me, and he said, "You are not some problem to be managed, Margaret. You are the woman I chose." I did not know then that I would ever need those words as armor. I only knew they were true, and that a man does not say a thing like that unless he means every syllable of it. I remember the whole conversation that came before those last words, because I have played it back to myself 1,000 times since. We were sitting together on our bed, and I had been fretting out loud about growing old, about the day I might not be able to keep up the house, about becoming a burden to the children. I get like that sometimes, in the dark, before sleep. And Walter listened to all of it, patient as ever, and then he took my hand in both of his big gentle ones. "Margaret," he said, "hear what I have watched happen to good women. I have walked this route 36 years. I have carried the mail up to 100 porches where an old woman sat, and I have watched her children start to talk about her like she wasn't in the room. Deciding things, moving her furniture, selling her car out from under her because it was safer. And every one of those women had a light go out behind her eyes, because the people who were supposed to love her had decided she was a chore instead of a queen." "Don't let that scare me, Walter," I said. "It scares me plenty already." "I'm not trying to scare you," he said. "I'm trying to arm you. So hear me. If a day ever comes when somebody decides you've gotten to be too much trouble, even somebody you love, even somebody born of your own flesh, you remember this. You are nobody's burden and nobody's chore. You are my queen, Margaret, the one I picked. And a chosen woman keeps her own name until the Lord takes it back himself." I laughed at him a little then. "You talk like I'm going to need a speech someday. Maybe you will," he said. "Keep it handy." I did not know, laughing on the edge of that bed, that I was going to need that speech, and that I would need it against the one child I would have sworn would never turn on me. But I kept it handy. Lord, did I keep it handy. So that is who I am. A widow, 70, in a paid-off house full of penciled heights and Sunday smells, with a dead husband's voice still teaching me how to stand up straight. And I will tell you now plainly that I did 2 things in secret the week all this started, so that you can carry them through the whole story as I carried them knowing they are there, but not yet knowing what they mean. The week the strange remarks began, the week my child first said the word to me, I quietly did 2 small, careful things, and I told no one. I will not tell you yet what they were. I will only tell you that they were the 2 things the law actually turns on, and that everything you are about to watch unfold was already decided by then. Folded up and waiting, while everyone around me was sure the ending would go the other direction. Now, about my daughter. Renata is my youngest. She came to us late, when I had almost stopped expecting another, and Walter used to say she arrived in the world already in a hurry, already certain that everything was moving too slowly for her. She was a beautiful child, and she is a beautiful woman, tall like her father, with a laugh that could fill a room, and I love her. Hear that before I tell you the rest. Because everything I did while loving her. That is the hard part. That is the part nobody in that courtroom understood. Let me hand you one memory of her as a girl, because it explains everything that came after better than I could explain it any other way. She was maybe 9 years old, and she had come home from a birthday party at a big house out on the water, one of those houses with a gate and a circular drive, and she sat at our kitchen table with her face in her hands. "Mama," she said, "why don't we have a house like that?" "Because that's not the house God gave us, baby," I said. "He gave us this one, and this one is paid for in love." "But their house has a pool," she said, "and a girl to clean it. And Lacey's mama has a car that opens its own doors." Walter was reading his paper across the table, and he lowered it and looked at her over the top of it. "Renata," he said, "you know what I carry to that big house on my route? Bills, stacks of them. Folks in those houses owe money to everybody, and they lie awake at night same as anybody, only they lie awake in a bigger bed." He folded the paper. "Rich isn't a house, baby girl. Rich is being able to sleep." She nodded, but I watched her face, and I saw that she did not believe him, not in her bones. She had already decided, at 9 years old, that the shape of a thing was the truth of it, that the pool and the car with the doors that opened themselves were what a good life looked like, and that our little paid-for house with the little penciled heights in my kitchen were a thing to be gotten past. And she spent the next 40 years trying to get past it. And every shop she opened was another try at that big house on the water, and every time it closed, the wanting only got sharper. Renata always wanted more than the life we had, and there is no sin in that. I wanted more for her too, but she wanted the shape of success more than the slow work of it. She opened her first boutique when she was 31, a pretty little shop downtown with clothes I could never have afforded, and it closed inside 2 years, and Walter and I quietly settled what was left of it so the debt would not follow her. She opened a second one, larger, with a partner who turned out to be no partner at all, and that one closed too, and by then Walter was gone, and it was my savings, my careful cafeteria, and postal savings that softened, that fall for her. I never once threw it in her face. Not once. A mother keeps no ledger against her own child. Or she is not supposed to. I did not. Then, a little over a year ago, Renata came to my kitchen on a Sunday afternoon and sat down at the very spot where her father had died, and she told me about the third one. The best one, she said. The one that was really going to work this time. She had found a space, a good space, in a part of town that was coming up, and she needed a loan, a serious loan, 6 figures, and the bank wanted a co-signer with property, and I had property. I had my Anson Street home, free and clear. I want to tell you exactly how I said no, because how I said it matters. I made her a cup of tea first. I set out the good cups, the ones with the little gold rims that had been my mother's. I sat down across from her, and I took her hand, and I said, "Baby, I am not going to co-sign this loan." She started talking fast, as she always does, all the numbers and the projections and the friend who did this exact thing and made a fortune. And I let her finish, because I have always let my children finish. "Mama, this one is different," she said. "I've done the homework this time. I've got a business plan, a real one, 40 pages. The location alone is worth it foot traffic like you wouldn't believe. I've already got 2 designers who want to consign with me. All I need is the co-signer. The bank loves everything else. It's just the collateral, just your signature and the deed sitting behind it, and Mama, I would never let anything happen to this house, I swear to you on Daddy's grave." "Don't swear on your father's grave to me, Renata," I said. And I said it soft, but I said it in the voice that used to stop her cold when she was small. Not for a loan. Your father's grave is not collateral either. That's not what I meant, she said quickly. I know it isn't, I said. But listen to what came out of your mouth. You just offered me your dead father's grave to get my signature. Sit with that a minute, baby, she flushed. And she looked down at her tea, and for a moment I thought maybe it had reached her. But then she lifted her chin and tried another door. Terence would do it, she said. If Terence had a house free and clear, he'd sign in a second. Then it's a mercy for both of you that Terence's house has a mortgage on it, I said. Because I raised you to stand on your own feet, not on your brother's. Then I said it again, gently, so there could be no mistaking it for a maybe. Renata, I love you more than my own breath, and I am not going to put this house up against a third try. Not because I doubt you. Because this house is the only thing your father and I ever finished together, and it is where I mean to die. An old woman in her own bed, in her own, paid-for house. I will help you other ways. I will pray for that shop every morning. But I will not sign the house away, and I need you to hear me tell you no, clear, so we never have to wonder later what I meant. She took her hand back. I remember that. She took her hand back off the table and folded her arms, and her face did something I had not seen it do since she was a teenager, a kind of shudder coming down. You'd rather sit in this old house alone, she said, than help your own daughter build something. I would rather keep the one promise I have left to your father, I answered, than break it for anybody living. Even you. Especially you, because you would not want a mother who breaks promises. She left without finishing her tea, and I told myself it would pass, as storms between mothers and grown children pass. I stayed at that kitchen table after she drove off, and I studied those penciled heights in the doorway, not yet knowing I had just made a sensible woman decide her mother had lost her mind. I only knew I had said no, and that it was the right no, and that saying it had cost me more than she would ever guess. That was the first time I refused her. There was a second time, 2 weeks later on the telephone, when she called with a new version of the numbers, softer this time. Mama, I ran it again, and if you just know, baby, I said. The answer is the same as it was at my table. It is a loving no, but it is a no. She was quiet a long moment. Okay, Mama, she said finally, in a voice that was too calm. And I should have known then. I have raised 4 children and buried a husband, and I know the difference between a person who has accepted a thing and a person who has decided to go around it. Renata had decided to go around it. I just did not yet know what going around it would look like. It looked, at first, like concern. It started small. It always starts small. About 3 weeks after that second refusal, we were all at my house for a Sunday dinner, Renata, and my son Terence and his wife, and 2 of the grandchildren and I was carrying the roast to the table, as I have carried 1,000 roasts to that table, and Renata said, in front of everyone, in a light and worried voice, Mama, be careful. You almost dropped that. You've been getting so forgetful lately. Now I had not almost dropped anything. My hands were as steady as they have ever been. But you cannot argue with the word forgetful without sounding like the very thing the word accuses you of being. If you say I am not forgetful too quickly, too warmly, people hear the heat and not the truth. So I set the roast down carefully, and I smiled, and I said, I've been carrying roasts to this table longer than you've been alive, baby, and everyone laughed, and it passed. But it did not fully pass, and you should hear how it went, because this is how it is done. A few minutes later, when I was cutting the meat, Renata said to the whole table, in that same light voice, Remember last month when Mama couldn't find her own reading glasses and they were up on her head the whole time? Now, everybody in the world has put their glasses on their head and forgotten them there. My grandson does it. The pastor does it. But when you say it about a 70-year-old woman, in that tender, worried voice, at a full dinner table, it stops being a funny little nothing and becomes a symptom. And I could feel it becoming a symptom. Right there over the roast. I surely did, I said, easy as I could. And then I found them, because they were on my own fool head. Terence, pass me your plate, baby. But I saw Terence's wife glance at Renata, and I saw a small thing pass between them. A look with weight in it, and a cold finger touched the back of my neck, because I had heard the first note of a song, and could not yet make out the whole melody. But I knew it was not a friendly one. The next week it was, "Mama, did you forget to call me back?" I called you twice. I had not forgotten. She had not called. But how do you prove a phone call that never happened? You cannot. That is the terrible cleverness of it. She was building something, brick by brick, out of things that could not be disproved, and she was building it in front of witnesses. The week after that, at church, she took my elbow going down the steps as if I were unsteady, and I am not unsteady. I have not once in my life fallen, and she said, loud enough for the two women behind us to hear, "I've got you, Mama. I know your balance isn't what it used to be." The two women made soft, sympathetic sounds, and one of them touched my other arm. And I understood, standing on those church steps in the sunshine, that a story was being told about me in this city, and it was not mine to tell it. I want to stop here and tell you the exact day it turned from something I could brush off into something I understood was a campaign. Because that is the day I did my two quiet things, and everything after was already decided, even though it took months to come true. It was a Tuesday. I remember, because I do my banking on Tuesdays, in person, at the branch on King Street, where they have known me for years. Renata came by the house that morning, unannounced, with coffee she had bought me, which she never did, and she sat me down at my own kitchen table with a tenderness a wiser me should have feared. "Mama," she said, "I've been talking to Terence, and to some people, and we're all just worried about you. You forget things. You told the same story twice at dinner. You almost fell at church. You're all alone in this big house. Maybe it's time we started helping you manage things. The house, the accounts. Just so you don't have to carry it all by yourself anymore." She said it so tenderly. That is what I remember most. She said it as you would say a kind thing to a child. And I regarded my daughter, my beautiful, hurrying daughter, sitting in the chair where her father died, telling me I was losing my mind, and I understood, all at once, cold and clear, what she was really saying. She was not offering to help me carry the house. She was telling me she had decided to take it, and that she had already begun laying the story that would let her, and that she believed I was too far gone to notice. I did not argue. That was the first thing I got right. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I did not say, "How dare you?" I did not tell her I knew exactly what she was doing, because a woman fighting to prove she is not losing her mind looks, to a watching world, exactly like a woman who is losing her mind. Anger would have been evidence. Tears would have been evidence. Everything I felt would have been turned into a symptom. So I put my feelings in a drawer inside myself, and I closed it. And I smiled, and I said, "That's kind of you to worry, baby. Let me think on it." And she left, pleased, believing she had planted the seed. And the moment her car turned off Anson Street, I picked up my telephone, and I did the two things I have been keeping from you. I am going to tell you now what they were, but I will ask you to hold them as I held them quietly, knowing they exist, but understanding that no one else in this story knew. Not Renata, not the lawyers, not the judge, not my own son, until the very end. Because that is the whole of it. That is how you win a thing like this. Not by shouting that you are fine, by quietly arming the one thing that can prove it, and then saying nothing at all while everyone else builds their case out of air. Here is the first of them. I telephoned a place I had already looked up, because I am not a foolish woman, and I had felt this coming for weeks. A place that does independent evaluations. Not a Dr. Renata could claim was in my pocket. Not even my own kind physician. An independent, court-recognized geriatric neuropsychological evaluation. The real kind. The kind a court cannot wave away. Performed by a specialist who had never met me and had no reason to be gentle. I made the appointment for myself, and I paid for it out of my own pocket. My own careful money. Because I wanted no one ever afterward to claim that somebody else arranged it. I wanted a stranger with letters after her name to sit me down for the better part of a day and test every corner of my mind and put her honest finding in writing under oath. And here is the second. I telephoned Dr. Aaron Whitfield. Dr. Whitfield had been my physician for 22 years. He had seen me through a hip that needed replacing, and a scare with my blood pressure, and the whole long grief after Walter. And he had kept my chart, faithfully, for more than 2 decades. He is a soft-spoken man, gray-haired now, always in a dark suit, with a sort of steady eyes that make you feel a thing is going to be all right just by looking at you. I telephoned him, and I told him, plainly, what my daughter had said to me at my kitchen table, and I asked him a simple question. I asked whether, in 22 years of knowing my mind, he had ever once seen a single sign of what she was describing. There was a silence on the line, and then he said, in that steady voice, "Margaret, you are one of the sharpest people I have the privilege of treating. I have never seen one sign of it. Not one." Then he said the thing that told me he understood, without my having to spell it out. "Do you need me to be able to say that somewhere official?" "I might," I said. "Would you be willing?" "Margaret, 22 years. You send whoever needs to hear it to me." That was all I did that Tuesday. I hung up the phone, and I made myself a proper lunch. Because I always make myself a proper lunch. And I sat at my own table in the house I had paid off myself. And I let the whole weight of what was coming settle onto me. And then I set it down beside me. And I went on with my day. Because now the 2 things the law actually turns on were in motion. And no one knew but me and one honest doctor. And I was going to let my daughter build her whole house of cards on the one table I had already quietly reinforced. She believed a daughter's word would be enough. It would not be enough. But she did not know that yet, and I had no intention of being the one to tell her. Now I have to take you through the hard middle. I have to carry you through the months where, to everyone watching, to my own family, to the neighbors, to the whole city, it looked like I was losing. Because I was letting it look that way. And you must sit with how much it costs a woman to let the people she loves believe she is failing, and to say nothing, because saying something would spend the one shot she has. The evaluation came first. I drove myself to it, downtown, on a morning in early spring, and I sat with the specialist, a brisk, kind woman who did not smile much and asked me a great many things. She had me remember lists of words and repeat them back an hour later. She had me draw a clock and copy shapes and do sums in my head and tell her the date and the season and the name of the building we were sitting in and explain old sayings and name as many animals as I could inside a minute and count backward by odd amounts. The room was plain and cool, with a clock on the wall that ticked loud in the quiet, and a paper cup of water she kept refilling. And I remember thinking, as I named my animals, that Walter would have grinned to watch me run rings around a test. I did all of it, hour after hour, and I did it well, and I knew I did it well. Because a woman knows her own mind as she knows her own kitchen in the dark. Toward the last hour, my hand grew tired from the drawing and the writing, and still I did not miss a single one. And a slip was the one thing I had feared walking in, and no slip ever came. At the end, the specialist looked up from her notes. "Mrs. Coleman," she said, "the written report will take some weeks. It will be thorough. It will be sworn, and whatever it finds, it will be honest. I have no dog in your family's fight." "Honest is all I have ever wanted," I told her. And I paid her and drove myself home and put the appointment out of my mind and let the rest of the storm come, because the storm did come. The next thing was the missed appointment. This was Renata's cleverest stroke, and I have to give her that, cold as it makes me to say it. She telephoned me one Wednesday and told me my eye doctor's office had moved my checkup to the following Monday at 2 in the afternoon, and she said it twice. "Monday at 2, Mama, write it down." So I wrote it down. Monday at 2, and on Monday I drove to the eye doctor at 1:45, and the girl at the desk regarded me with a puzzled kindness and told me my appointment had been Wednesday. The Wednesday just passed. That I had missed it, that my daughter had telephoned the office herself, worried, to say her mother had gotten confused about the date. I stood at that desk, and I understood, in a flash of cold clarity, exactly what had happened. She had told me the wrong day on purpose, and told the office the true day, and manufactured a record, an actual record, in a doctor's file of a confused old woman who missed her appointment, and whose worried daughter had to telephone about it. It was a small thing. It was a devastating thing. It was a brick in the wall, and it was a brick that could be pointed to. And do you know what I did? I did not make a scene at that desk. I did not say, "My daughter is setting me up." Because who says such a thing except, in the world's eyes, a paranoid, confused old woman? Instead, I said, calmly, "I see. I must have crossed my wires. Let's make a new one, and this time I'll write it on my own calendar the moment we set it." And I did. And I went home. And that night I took my kitchen calendar down off its nail, and from that day forward I wrote everything on it in my own hand, dated, and I kept every letter and card and receipt in a folder. Because I understood now that I was living inside somebody's story about me, and the only route out was to keep my own quiet record, one that could not be argued with. There is a woman at my bank on King Street, a teller named Doris, who has waited on me most Tuesdays for a dozen years, and the week after the missed appointment I went in as always, and Doris slid my receipt across and lowered her voice. "Miss Margaret," she said, "I hate to speak out of turn, but your daughter came in here last week asking questions. Wanted to know about your accounts, whether she was on any of them, whether she could get access if you weren't able to manage them yourself anymore." I kept my face still. "And what did you tell her, Doris?" "I told her I couldn't discuss your business with anybody but you," Doris said, "and that in 12 years I never once saw you unable to manage a nickel. But I thought you ought to know she's asking." She paused. "You all right, Miss Margaret?" "I'm all right, Doris," I said. "You just keep doing exactly what you did, telling anybody who asks the plain truth of what you see. That's all I need from anybody in this whole city." And I walked out onto King Street in the sunshine, and I understood that my daughter was not just building a story now. She was scouting the doors. She was finding out which locks she'd need my incapacity to open. And every door she rattled, somebody honest was standing behind it, who had known me for years, the teller, the pastor, the doctor, and none of them saw what she needed them to see. She was building a case that the whole city, if anyone asked it, would contradict. She just did not know yet that I was quietly asking. She would learn what a record could do. But not yet. Then came the whispers. My son Terrence telephoned me, gently, worried, and I could hear Renata's fingerprints all over the worry. "Mama, are you doing okay over there?" he said. "Renata says you've been struggling." "Renata says a great many things, baby," I told him. "I am doing just fine. I made a pound cake this morning and balanced my checkbook this afternoon, and I am fine." There was a pause. And I heard in that pause that my own son half believed her. "Mama," he said, careful, "Renata showed me some things. A note from the eye doctor's office about the missed appointment. She's got a little list going. Dates, things you said twice. She's not making it up out of nothing. No, she is not spinning something up out of thin air," I agreed. "She's making it up out of somethings. That's cleverer. Terrence, answer me one thing honestly. In all your life, in all your growing up in this house, did I ever once lose track of you? Did I ever forget to feed you, or leave you somewhere, or fail to be exactly where I said I'd be? No. Mama, never then hold that Margaret in your mind," I said, "the one you actually know, and weigh her against the Margaret on Renata's little list. And I'm not going to argue with the list. I'm just going to ask you to keep your own eyes open and not lend anybody your judgment. Can you do your mother that much?" "I can," he said, but he said it slow. And I heard in his slowness that my own boy's voice had gone careful with me, gentle and thin, as you go careful with somebody you have decided is fragile. And that was the coldest thing yet. Colder than the courtroom would be. The relatives began to call less and to visit more, if you understand the difference. They stopped talking to me like a woman and started talking to me like a patient. My sister-in-law brought me a pill organizer I did not need and showed me how to use it slowly, loudly, and I permitted it. And I said thank you, and I put it in a drawer. My granddaughter, my sweet Aaliyah, grown now and in nursing school, came to me one afternoon with tears standing in her eyes and hugged me too long, and when I asked her what was wrong, she pulled back and looked at me. "Mama Margaret," she said, "is it true? Are you not well? Mama says you're not well." And I held my grandchild, and I felt my heart break clean in two, and I made the hardest choice of the whole long fight, right there, holding her. I did not tell Aaliyah the truth. I could have. I could have said, "Baby, your mother is lying. She is trying to take my house, and I have already armed myself, and it is all going to be fine." But if I told Aaliyah, Aaliyah might tell her mother, out of hurt or out of love, and then Renata would know I saw it coming. And then Renata would go back to the well and find some other angle, and I would lose my one advantage, that she believed I was blind. So I looked my grieving grandchild in the eye, and I lied to her by leaving the truth unsaid. "I am well, baby," I told her. "I am tired, but I am well. And promise me one thing. Whatever anybody says about me in the little while ahead, remember your grandmother's face. And remember that I am telling you right now, looking straight at you, that I am well. Can you hold on to that?" "I can," she whispered. And she did. And one day she would understand why I asked it. But that afternoon I just let her believe I might be losing my mind, and I let her go home carrying that grief. And there is nothing, I think, there is anything I have ever done that hurt worse than that. There was one more thing before the report came, and it was the hardest room I sat in before the courtroom itself. Renata organized what she called a family talk one Sunday, and she filled my own front room with people: Terence and his wife, an aunt by marriage, 2 cousins, even the pastor, who came thinking, I believe, that he was helping. And they sat me down in my own chair, in my own front room, and they took turns, gently, tearfully, telling me it was time. "Mama," Renata began, "we love you. That's why we're all here. Nobody's against you. We just think it's time to let us help carry some of the load. Let me handle the accounts. Let me look after the house. You've earned a rest." "I've earned a rest," I repeated, turning the words over. "And where would this rest be taken, Renata? In this house or somewhere else?" She hesitated. "We'd figure that out together." "That's not an answer, baby. That's a door left open. Say the whole thing out loud, here, in front of the pastor." "Do you mean to sell this house?" The room went quiet. My sister-in-law jumped in, kind and useless. "Margaret, nobody's talking about selling anything. We just worry about you alone in here." "I've been alone in here since the morning Walter died in that kitchen," I said, "and never once have I burned it down or wandered off into the street." "Pastor, you've known me 30 years. Have you ever, one Sunday, seen me lost in my own faith or my own mind?" And the pastor, God bless him, looked around that room and cleared his throat and said, "Margaret, I have not. And I'll be honest. Family, I came here to support a concern, but I've been sitting here 20 minutes, and I have not heard one thing from this woman's own mouth that troubles me." Renata's face tightened, and I saw, in that tightening, that she was not going to be talked out of it by a room, not even by the pastor, because she had already gone too far in her own mind to turn back. So, I did not press my small victory. I let it be. I stood up and I served everybody coffee and pound cake, and I thanked them all for loving me enough to come, and I sent them home. And I told no one that I already held, upstairs in my bureau, the very item that would end it. I just let them go on believing they had planted a seed in a fading woman, when in truth they had only given me one more roomful of witnesses. That is what these people do not understand about the ones they try to manage. They think we do not feel it. They think an old woman who says nothing must be a woman who does not know. I knew every bit of it. I felt every whisper. I simply decided that my grandchild's few weeks of unnecessary grief were a smaller price than my whole house and my whole name, and so I paid it, quietly, and told no one, and waited. Then, the report came. It arrived in a thick envelope from the evaluation office, and I opened it at the kitchen table with a knife, carefully, as you open something that might matter, and I read every page. It was long, and it was thorough, and it used a great many words I had to read twice, but the finding was as plain and as sworn as I had prayed it would be. The specialist wrote that I showed no evidence of cognitive impairment, that my memory, my reasoning, my judgment, my orientation, all of it tested at or above what she expected of a woman my age, and above it in several places. That in her sworn professional opinion I was fully capable of managing my own affairs, my own household, and my own finances, and that she found no basis whatsoever for a finding of incapacity. It was signed. It was sealed. It was the sworn opposite of every word my daughter had been whispering for months. I read it 3 times. Then I got up, and I fetched the good manila folder I had bought for exactly this, and I placed the report inside it. And I placed inside it, too, the copies of my letters and my dated calendar pages and Dr. Whitfield's card. And I closed the clasp, and I put that folder in the top drawer of my bedroom bureau, under Walter's folded flag, and I said out loud, to the empty room, to my husband, "I've got it. Whatever they do, I've got it. You go on and rest now." I sat a while longer with my hand flat on that closed folder, and I could almost hear him say it back, the way he used to when a hard thing was finally handled. There's my girl, and the kitchen was dark by then, and the icebox hummed. And I did not turn on the light for the longest time. And I will admit it, I slept that night better than I had slept in months. Now, I could have ended it right there. Some of you are thinking exactly that. Why did I not go to Renata with that report and say, "Look, I know what you're doing. Here is proof I am fine. Stop this now"? Why did I let it march clear into a courtroom? I have asked myself that. And here is the honest truth, and it is not a proud truth, but it is honest. If I had shown her the report early, she would have folded that particular hand, apologized, cried, told me she only ever wanted what was best, and we would have gone on. And in a year or two, when the next shop failed, she would have found another route. She would have learned nothing except that her mother held a card, and she would have spent the coming years figuring out how to beat it. Some lessons a person only learns in public, with a judge watching. I did not do it to be cruel. I did it because I loved her enough to want her finally, fully stopped not by her mother, who she could always talk around, but by the truth, out in the open, where she could not pretend it away. And I will let you decide, at the end, whether I was right. There was one last attempt to do it the easy way, and you should know about it, because it is the moment I knew for certain there would be no talking her down. About 2 weeks before the petition came, Renata sat me down again, and this time she brought a piece of paper of her own. "Mama," she said, "I've thought about it, and I don't want to fight with you. So let's do this the simple way. It's just a power of attorney. You sign it, and it lets me help you with the accounts and the paperwork if you ever can't. It doesn't take anything away from you. You keep the house, you keep everything. It just means if something happens, I can step in without a bunch of court trouble. Any lawyer would tell you it's the responsible thing at your age." And she slid it across the table toward me, across that same kitchen table. The same wood where her father breathed his last. The same table where she'd once offered me his grave. I read it, slowly, in front of her, so she could watch me read it. Because I wanted her to see me being competent while she asked me to sign away my competence. It was not the small thing she called it. It was durable, and it was broad, and it would have given her the keys to everything on nothing but her own say-so. "Baby," I said, and I slid it back to her. "You sat in my front room 3 weeks ago with the pastor and told the whole family I can't manage my own affairs. And now you want me to use those same affairs I supposedly can't manage to sign them over to you. Do you hear the trouble in that? If I'm too addled to run my own accounts, then I'm too addled to sign this, and it isn't worth the paper. And if I'm sound enough to sign it, then I'm sound enough not to. There's no door there, Renata. You built a house with no doors." Her jaw set, and she took the paper back and folded it, and she said, very quietly, "Then I'll have to manage it another way." And she got up, and she left, and I sat at my table, and I knew that the other way meant a courthouse, and I knew, too, that I was ready for it, and that I had been ready for weeks. She thought she was choosing the hard road because I had left her no easy one. She had no idea she was walking straight into the one room where the truth I'd been holding could finally be said out loud. So I waited, and in the fullness of time, on an ordinary Thursday, the doorbell rang. A polite young man in a short-sleeved shirt stood on my porch with an envelope. "Are you Margaret Coleman?" he asked. "I am," I said. He handed me the envelope. "You've been served. Have a good day, ma'am." And he went back down my steps to his car, and I stood on my own porch, under my own old oak, holding a petition for guardianship of the person and estate of Margaret Coleman. I sat down on the porch swing and read it in the afternoon light. My daughter had petitioned the probate court to be made my guardian. The petition said that I, Margaret Coleman, was an incapacitated person. It said I forgot to eat and neglected my health. It said I had missed medical appointments and grown confused about dates. It said I could no longer manage my household or my finances and was a danger to myself living alone. It asked the court to appoint Renata as guardian of my person and conservator of my estate, which is to say, it asked the court to give my daughter the legal right to decide where I lived and to control every dollar I had, and to sell, if she saw fit, the home I had paid off board by board. Hear about the nights in the weeks before that petition came, because a story like mine can make it sound as if I was made of iron, and I was not. There were nights I got down on my knees at the side of the bed I shared with Walter for 38 years, and I put my folded hands on that quilt, unsure how to even pray about my own child. What do you ask God for, when the one who is coming against you came from your own body? I could not ask him to defeat her. She was my baby. So I prayed a coward's careful prayer for a while. Lord, let this cup pass. Let her come to her senses and drop it. And it did not pass. And then one night, kneeling there, I stopped asking for the cup to pass, and I asked for something harder. Lord, I said out loud, into the dark, if she won't stop, then let me be strong enough to let the truth stop her, and merciful enough to still love her on the other side of it. Don't let me win it ugly. Don't let me become bitter in my own house. Let me keep my name and keep my heart both, if that's a thing a woman can do. And a peace came over me after that prayer that had not been there before, and I got up off my knees, and I slept. Faith did not spare me the fight, but it changed the woman who went into it. I stopped praying to be rescued and started praying to be steadfast, and steadfast was the thing I actually needed. I read the petition twice, on the swing, with the oak leaves stirring over me. I neither wept nor raged. A great stillness came over me, the stillness a body feels when the waiting is finally over, and the thing it has braced for has arrived at last. My daughter had put in writing, in a court of law, that her mother had lost her mind, and upstairs in my bureau, under her father's flag, sat the sworn proof that I had not. She had built her whole case. And she had built it, every brick, on the one thing she was certain of, and the single fact that was not true. She had staked it all on her word alone being enough. It would not be enough. But she did not know that, and I read the date of the hearing, and I marked it on my calendar in my own hand, and I went inside and made my supper. I did get myself a lawyer, and let me speak of her, because she is part of how this was done quietly. Her name was Yvette Osei, a young woman, sharp as a new blade, recommended to me by a friend from church. I went to her office and laid it all out, and I opened the folder and let her read the evaluation and Dr. Whitfield's willingness to testify, and I watched her take it in, and I saw her face travel from careful lawyer blankness to something like a slow, delighted fire. "Mrs. Coleman," she said, setting the report down, "do you understand what you're holding?" "I believe I do," I said. "I believe I'm holding the thing these cases actually turn on." She looked at me a long moment. "Most people in your position come in frightened," she said. "They want me to fight the whole story, argue every appointment, every dinner. That's a losing game. It becomes your word against hers, an old woman against her worried daughter, and judges have seen 100 of those." She tapped the report. "But this, A guardianship doesn't run on whether your daughter is worried. It runs on one question, and one question only. Are you legally incapacitated? And that is a medical question, not a family question, not a feelings question, a medical one. And the burden is on her to prove it with clear and convincing evidence. And you, she said, are holding a sworn, independent finding that says the opposite, done by a court-recognized specialist at your own expense, unprompted, months before she even filed. She sat back. Mrs. Coleman, how did you know to do this? My husband was a postal man for 36 years, I said. He taught me that a letter is only as good as the record that it was sent. I have kept a record my whole life, and when my daughter started telling a story about me, I decided to keep a record of the truth. Yvette Osai smiled then, a real smile. Here's what I'd like to do, she said, if you'll let me. I'd like to hold this, all of it. I don't want to hand it to opposing counsel early and give them months to hunt for a weakness or find their own doctor. In a guardianship, the petitioner puts on their case first, they carry the burden. So we let them stand up and say their whole piece. We let them call it confusion and danger and decline. And then, when it's our turn, we put your physician of 22 years on that stand, and we put this sworn evaluation into the record, and we let the judge see the whole thing land at once. In public, on the record. She paused. It isn't the flashiest route, but it's the most dignified, and it's the most complete. She won't be able to say she wasn't heard. She'll have said every word she wanted to say. And then the truth will simply be there, and it will be over. That, I said, is exactly what I want. Let her have her whole say, and then let the truth take the stand. Before the hearing, I went to see Dr. Whitfield in his office one last time, to thank him and to make sure he understood what he was walking into. Because a man does not owe you his afternoon in a courtroom just because he likes you. Aaron, I said, for after 22 years I called him Aaron. When it was just the two of us, I have to know you are sure about this. Her lawyer is going to try to make you look like an old country doctor who's soft on a favorite patient. He's going to ask if you're a specialist. He's going to ask if you can really know what happens in my house at night. I don't want you embarrassed on my account. Doctor, Whitfield took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. And then he looked at me with those steady eyes. Margaret, he said, across all these years, do you know how many families I've watched try to do this to a parent? More than you'd believe. Sometimes the parent really is failing, and it's a mercy, and I say so. But sometimes it's this. Somebody wants something, and a doctor's silence gets used as a weapon. I've had my findings twisted in more than one of these, so no, I am not embarrassed to sit in a courtroom and tell the truth about a sound mind. I've spent 22 years wishing more of my patients had done what you did before it was too late for me to help them. You let that lawyer say whatever he likes. I have your whole chart, and your chart tells the truth, and the truth is not shy. I reached across his desk and took that man's hand, without words and needing none, because after 22 years you can thank a person with your hand. So we prepared, and even the preparing was quiet. Dr. Whitfield agreed to appear and to bring 22 years of my records lucid, ordinary, consistent. A woman who came in every year, remembered her own history, asked good questions, managed her own medications, drove herself, lived her own life. My lawyer subpoenaed nothing dramatic, made no threats, sent no fiery letters. She simply, quietly, got ready to let the plain truth do the testifying. And I went on living my life, and I let my family go on believing what they believed, never telling one living soul what was folded in the drawer under Walter's flag. There were hard days in that stretch. I will not pretend there were not. There was a Sunday dinner where Renata brought a social worker with her, a nice enough woman, doing her job, who came to just check on the home environment and who walked through my house making notes and looked at my full refrigerator and my clean kitchen and my paid bills laid out neat. "Mrs. Coleman," the social worker said, notebook open on her knee, "do you mind if I ask you a few questions? Just routine." "Ask me anything you like, honey," I said, "and have some pound cake while you do it. I made it this morning. Recipe's older than both of us put together. Can you tell me today's date and the season?" I told her, plainly, month and day, and the season. And I threw in the day of the week for good measure. She wrote it down. "And do you handle your own bills? Your own banking?" "Every Tuesday, in person, at the branch on King Street," I said. "They know me there." "Would you like to see this month's? I keep them in a folder, all paid, all logged." And I brought her the folder, and she leafed through it, and her eyebrows went up, because a confused woman does not keep a folder like that. "Do you cook for yourself, Mrs. Coleman? Eat regular meals?" "Child, look in that refrigerator," I said. "Look in the freezer while you're at it. I cook for one and freeze the rest in little dishes, so I've always got a proper supper. An old woman who forgets to eat does not keep a freezer like that either." She looked. She wrote, and near the end she set her pen down and looked at me plainly, and I think, for a moment, the two of us understood each other. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "off the record you seem entirely well to me." "I am entirely well," I said. "But you put it on the record, honey. You put down exactly what your own eyes saw in this house. That's all I ask. And I never once let on that I knew exactly why she was there beyond her own routine, or how much I welcomed every honest set of eyes on my house. Because every honest set of eyes was one more witness to a woman who was perfectly fine. And there was the night Terence came over alone and sat with me at my kitchen table one night and finally said it straight, my good boy, worried half to tears. "Mama, if you're not well, there's no shame in it. We just want you safe." Renata says I stopped him there, gently, one hand over his. "Terence," I said, "do something for me. I need you to come to that courthouse on the day and sit in the back and watch the whole thing with your own eyes and not decide anything until it's done. Can you do that for your mother? Just come and watch. And keep your mind open till the end." "I'll come, Mama," he said. That was all I asked of him. I did not defend myself to my son. I asked him to be a witness, because I knew what he was going to witness. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in that wood-paneled probate courtroom, the one with the tall windows that let the morning light come in warm and gold across the old floors. And that carries us full circle, back to where I began, to the moment you opened this story upon. Me in my navy suit, sitting straight, with a closed manila folder on my lap, listening to a lawyer tell a judge I was confused. Let me take you fully into that room now, because this is the part I have carried you toward. I dressed carefully that morning. Let me describe what I wore, because it mattered to me, and it will matter to you when you understand the whole of it. I wore my navy suit, the good one, jeweled deep blue, the color Walter always said made me look like I was going somewhere important. I pinned my grandmother's small brooch to the lapel. I did my silver hair, close-cropped and natural as I have worn it for years now, and I settled my reading glasses up on the top of my head where they live when I am not reading. I looked at myself in the mirror, a broad-faced woman of 70, with a set jaw and tired eyes and 41 years of Anson Street behind her, and I said to that woman, out loud, "You are no one's task to be handled and put away. You are the one he picked." Then I picked up the manila folder, and I drove myself to the courthouse, and I parked my own car, and I walked in on my own 2 steady feet. The courtroom was warm and hushed. The judge was a woman perhaps a decade younger than me, with silver at her temples and a face that had clearly heard a great many family stories and grown tired of the ones that were not true. Renata sat at the petitioner's table with her attorney, a polished man in a gray suit who moved his papers like a man expecting an easy morning. My Renata looked beautiful and certain, and I thought just slightly nervous, as you are nervous before a thing you are sure will go your favor, but which is still, after all, a courtroom. She did not look at me. In the back I saw Terence slip in and take a seat, keeping his promise, and my heart caught to see him. My lawyer, Yvette, sat beside me, calm, her own thin folder squared on the table. And I sat straight, with my hands folded on the manila folder, and I did not open it. The petitioner goes first. So Renata's attorney rose and made his case, and I made myself sit still and listen to every word of it. I will tell you, hearing a stranger describe you as a broken thing in a room full of people while your own child nods along is a particular kind of cold that I hope none of you ever know. Your Honor, he began, this is a difficult matter, as these always are. No child wishes to stand in this room. But Miss Coleman comes before this court out of love and genuine fear for her mother's safety. He walked the judge through it, brick by brick, the whole wall Renata had built. The respondent is 70 years old and lives entirely alone in a large, aging two-story home. Over the past year, her family has observed a marked decline. She has become forgetful, repeating stories, losing track of conversations. She missed a medical appointment and grew confused about the date, requiring my client to intervene with the provider. She has had episodes of unsteadiness, including a near fall at her church, witnessed by others. My client is deeply concerned that her mother is no longer eating properly, no longer able to reliably manage a household of that size, and no longer able to safely manage her own finances and property. He let it land. Your Honor, we are not here to embarrass anyone. We are here because a loving daughter would rather do the hard thing now than bury regret later. We ask the court to appoint Miss Renata Coleman as guardian of the person and conservator of the estate, so that her mother may be cared for and her affairs protected before something irreversible occurs. He sat down, and the room was very quiet, and I felt every eye in that room slide over to me, the broken old woman in the navy suit, with that soft, awful pity, and I sat there and let them pity me, my folder still shut. Renata's attorney called her to testify, and my daughter took the stand, and she was good. I will not lie to you. She was good. She spoke softly. She let her voice tremble at the right places. Her attorney walked her through it, slow and warm. Miss Coleman, when did you first begin to worry about your mother? About a year ago, Renata said. Little things at first. She'd repeat a story she'd just told. She'd forget she'd called me, or forget she hadn't. Then it got bigger. She missed a doctor's appointment and got the day completely wrong. I had to call the office myself. She nearly fell coming down the church steps. She's alone in a big two-story house with a steep staircase, and I lie awake at night thinking about that staircase. And how did that make you feel, watching this decline? Helpless, she said, and her voice cracked, and it was a real crack, I'll give her that. You spend your whole childhood being taken care of by this strong, capable woman, and then one day you realize the roles have turned, and she needs you now, and she won't admit it. She's too proud. She'll insist she's fine right up until something terrible happens, and I couldn't live with myself if I waited for the terrible thing. I love my mother more than anything in this world, she went on, and I believe some part of her even meant it, which is the thing that will haunt me all my days. She described the missed appointment and the near fall, and the repeated stories once more, all the bricks, and she dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I'm not doing this to hurt her," Renata said. "I'm doing it because I'm terrified I'll get a phone call one day that she's fallen down those stairs or left the stove on, and I could have prevented it, and didn't. I just want her safe. That's all. I just want my mama safe." A soft sound went around that courtroom, a warm murmur of sympathy for the good daughter. I saw the social worker in the second row nod. I saw my own son Terence in the back with his head bowed, and I thought, for just one moment, how thoroughly I might have lost this if I had walked in with nothing but my own word. The judge asked Renata a few gentle questions. Then she looked at my lawyer. "Does the respondent wish to cross-examine?" Yvette stood. "Just briefly, Your Honor." She turned to my daughter with a calm, almost kind expression, and she asked her exactly 3 questions, and you must hear them, because they were the quietest, most surgical thing I have ever watched. "Miss Coleman," she said, "you've described your mother as confused. Are you a physician?" Renata blinked. "No. Are you a psychologist or trained in any way in the assessment of cognitive function?" "No. So your belief that your mother is incapacitated, that is a layperson's observation. A worried daughter's impression, not a clinical finding. Is that fair?" And Renata, who is no fool, felt the ground move under her, just slightly. "I'm her daughter," she said. "I know her." "I'm sure you love her very much," Yvette said gently. "No further questions." And she sat down. I saw the polished attorney frown, just a little, and shuffle his papers, and I understood that he too had felt it, the first cold draft under the door. The petitioner rested. The judge looked over her glasses. "Does the respondent wish to present evidence?" Yvette rose. In a perfectly ordinary voice, she said, "We do, Your Honor. The respondent calls Dr. Aaron Whitfield." And the doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and Dr. Whitfield walked in. I will remember that walk until the day I die. He came in his dark suit, gray-haired, unhurried, carrying a folder of his own thick with 22 years, and he came down the center aisle toward the witness stand with the quiet steadiness of a man who has spent his life telling people the truth about their own bodies. I watched Renata's face as she turned to see who her mother's lawyer could possibly be calling, and I watched her recognize him. I watched my daughter recognize the doctor who had tended me 2 decades and more, the man who had treated her mother since Renata herself was a young woman. And I watched the certainty go out of her face like water going out of a cracked cup. Her hand came up, slowly, and covered her mouth. Beside her, her polished attorney leaned in and murmured something urgent, and then he too went still, because there is nothing you can murmur that changes a doctor who has known you 2 full decades walking toward the stand. Dr. Whitfield took the oath in his steady voice. And Yvette rose and without any drama at all, quietly, she began. "Dr. Whitfield, how long have you been Margaret Coleman's physician?" 22 years, he said. "How often do you see her?" "At least once a year. More often when there is cause. I've treated her through a hip replacement, managed her blood pressure, and cared for her through the loss of her husband. I know her medical history as well as I know any patient's. In those 22 years, doctor, have you ever observed any sign of cognitive decline? Any confusion, memory loss, disorientation, or diminished judgment?" "Doctor," Whitfield turned, slightly, so that he was speaking not only to the lawyer but to the judge. "No," he said, clearly, "not once. Not one sign. Margaret Coleman is one of the most mentally sharp patients in my practice. She manages her own medications correctly. She keeps better records of her own health than most doctors keep. She asks precise questions. She has never missed an appointment in my office, and at every single visit she has been fully oriented, lucid, and in complete command of her faculties. In more than 2 decades of caring for her, I have never once had a moment's concern about her mind. You could hear the room breathing. Yvette let it sit. Then she said, "Doctor, are you aware of an independent evaluation performed on Mrs. Coleman?" "I am." "By whom?" "By a board-certified neuropsychologist, court-recognized, whom Mrs. Coleman engaged and paid for herself, independently, some months ago." "And have you reviewed that report?" "I have, and its findings match everything I have observed for 22 years. "Thank you, doctor. Nothing further." The judge looked at the petitioner's table. Cross-examination? Renata's polished attorney stood, and I watched him try, because he had to try, and you should hear how a smart man sounds when the ground has already gone out from under him. "Dr. Whitfield," he said, "you're not a neurologist, are you? Not a specialist in dementia?" "I am not, doctor," Whitfield said calmly. "I am her primary physician of 22 years, which is precisely why I would notice a change. A specialist sees a patient once. I have watched this woman's mind operate across 2 decades. Decline shows itself first to the people who see the baseline. I am the baseline." The attorney tried another door. "But you can't be with her at home. You can't know what happens when she's alone, whether she leaves the stove on, whether she—" "No," said Dr. Whitfield. "And neither can your client, and neither can you. That is exactly why the law does not ask any of us to guess. It asks for an evaluation. And there is one sworn in the record, and it agrees with me completely. You are welcome to produce a contrary medical finding. Do you have one?" The attorney stood there. He did not have one. Renata had never gotten one, because she had been so certain her own say-so would carry the day that it had not occurred to her she would need a doctor of her own. "No further questions," he said, and sat down, and the small sound of his chair was, I think, the loneliest sound in that whole room. Yvette turned to the judge. "Your Honor, at this time, the respondent moves to enter into the record the sworn independent geriatric neuropsychological evaluation of Margaret Coleman, performed at her own expense, prior to the filing of this petition." She reached over, and I handed her the manila folder, the folder I had held closed on my lap through every word of the morning, and I opened the clasp myself. And I gave it to her, and she gave it to the court. The judge read it. The whole room waited while the judge read it, page by page, her eyes moving, her expression settle into something firm and final. When she finished, she took off her reading glasses, and she looked out at that courtroom, and she looked at Renata, and then she looked at me. And something passed between us, one older woman to another, that I will keep for the rest of my life. Then the judge spoke, and I will set down her words as near to whole as I can, because they are the words I waited months in silence to hear said out loud in public. "I have before me," the judge said, "a sworn, independent neuropsychological evaluation performed by a court-recognized specialist at the respondent's own initiative and expense, months before this petition was ever filed. That evaluation finds no cognitive impairment of any kind and concludes that the respondent is fully capable of managing her person, her household, and her estate. Before me sits the sworn testimony of the doctor who has treated her 22 years and never once observed one sign of incapacity. And I have before me a petition that rests, in its entirety, on the impressions of a family member who has candidly acknowledged she is not medically qualified to assess capacity." She set the report down. "Let me be very clear about what a guardianship is. A guardianship is the most severe restriction of liberty this court can impose upon an adult short of criminal confinement. It strips a person of the right to decide where they live, how they spend their money, and how they conduct their life. This court does not grant it because a family member is worried. This court does not grant it upon impressions, or upon missed appointments, or upon the ordinary forgetfulness of a busy life. It grants it only upon clear and convincing evidence of genuine incapacity. The petitioner has not come close to that standard. The evidence before me is not merely insufficient, it is directly and overwhelmingly to the contrary. She turned then to Renata. Her voice did not rise, but it went very cold and very clear. Miss Coleman, I am going to say something to you, and I want you to hear it. Your mother sat in this room this morning and listened to you tell this court that she has lost her mind. She did not raise her voice. She did not weep. She waited. And the reason she could wait, I now understand, is that months ago, the moment concern was first raised, she quietly did the one responsible, dignified thing a competent adult can do. She had herself independently, honestly evaluated by a stranger with no stake in the outcome, so that what was real would be on the record, no matter what anyone said about her. That is not the act of a confused woman. That is the act of one of the most clear-minded people to come before this bench in a very long time. She let it settle. The petition for guardianship over my person and my estate, both of the estate of Margaret Coleman, is denied in its entirety. The court finds the respondent fully competent. Costs of this proceeding are assessed against the petitioner. And Miss Coleman, the judge, held my daughter's eyes. I would encourage you to reflect, very seriously, on the difference between protecting someone and controlling them. This court sees that difference clearly. I hope, in time, that you will as well. She brought her gavel down, once, softly, and it was over. Let me describe what I did in that moment, because the whole story has been carrying toward it, and it is not what you might expect. I did not stand up in triumph. I did not turn to my daughter and say, "I told you so." I felt no triumph at all, in truth. I felt a great grief and a great tiredness, and beneath both of them, way down, a small steady flame that was not victory, but was very close to peace. I stood up, slowly, and I gathered the manila folder back into my hands. And I walked over to the petitioner's table, where my daughter sat with her face in her hands, her polished attorney already packing his briefcase and not meeting anyone's eyes. And the whole room went quiet again, watching. Because I think they expected the old woman to finally say her piece, to let the villain have it at last. I put my hand on my daughter's shoulder. She looked up at me, my beautiful hurrying child, with her makeup ruined and her certainty gone, and I said the only thing I had to say. I said it quietly, just for her, though the room was so still that everyone heard it anyway. "I would have given you the moon, Renata," I said. "All you ever had to do was ask me for it as my daughter, and not try to take it as my keeper. That was all." That was the one devastating quiet line I had been saving through all those months of silence, and it was not a knife. It was the truth, and the truth was heavier than any knife could be. I saw it land in her, deep down to the bottom of her, and I could see her understand, really understand, maybe for the first time in her life, what she had done, and who she had done it to. And I saw her mouth open, and no sound come out. I patted her shoulder once, as I have patted that shoulder 1,000 times since she was small, and I turned and walked out of that courtroom on my own 2 steady feet, into the warm gold light of the hallway, with my son Terence coming after me, calling, "Mama, Mama." "Wait." I stopped, and I turned, and my boy looked at me with his whole face broken open with shame and love. "Mama, I'm so sorry," he said. I should have. I put my hand up and stopped him. "You came," I said, I asked you to come and watch with an open mind, and you came, and you watched. That's all I ever asked of you. You don't owe me an apology for being worried about your mother. Worry isn't the sin. Renata's sin wasn't worry, baby. Renata's sin was deciding I was a problem instead of a person. He walked me down that long hallway with the gold light coming through it, and at the doors he stopped, and he could not hold it any longer. Mama, she showed me that list, and I looked at it, and part of me believed it. My own mother, and I looked at a piece of paper, and I let it make me doubt you. How do I live with that? You live with it the same way we all live with the times we were wrong, I said. You let it teach you. Terence, I'm not going to tell you the doubt was a sin, because worry born of love is not a sin. But I'll tell you what nearly was. You almost lent your judgment to somebody else instead of using your own. That's the thing to carry out of this room. Next time somebody hands you a list about a person you love, you go look at the person. You don't look at the list. Yes, Mama, he said. And he was crying, my big grown son, right there in the courthouse. And I reached up and wiped his face with my thumb the same as I did when he was 6 years old. Now dry up, I said. Your mother won. Walk her to her car like a gentleman. And he laughed through the tears, a wet, broken laugh. And he took my arm, and he walked me to my car. And he held the door, and I drove myself home to my own front porch on Anson Street. That evening I called my granddaughter Aaliyah, because she was the one owed the truth first. And I asked her to come sit with me. And when she came, I sat her down at that same worn table, and I told her everything, the 2 quiet things, the folder in the bureau. The reason I had asked her that day to remember my face and hold on to it. You knew the whole time, Aaliyah said, staring at me. All those months I was grieving, thinking I was losing you, you already knew you were going to win. And you couldn't tell me. I couldn't tell you, baby, I said. Because you loved your mother too, and I couldn't ask a young woman to carry both of us and keep a secret that big. So, I asked you the only thing I could. I asked you to remember my face and hold on to it. And you did. Do you know what that gave me, all those hard months? Knowing that somewhere in this city, one person had promised to hold on to the true Margaret no matter what anybody said. You were my witness, baby, before there was a courtroom. You just didn't know it. And she came around the table and put her arms around my neck, and this time it was the right kind of holding. And we sat there in my kitchen a long time in the gathering dark. Now I must tell you the last part, the part that comes after, because a reckoning is not finished at the moment the gavel comes down. It is finished in what a person does with the months that follow. Renata did not call me for a long time. Months, through the spring and into the summer, silence. I will not pretend that silence was easy. There were nights I sat on my porch swing under the old oak and ached for the sound of my daughter's voice, cost and all. But I did not call her either. And here is why. Because it is the heart of everything I believe. I did not call her because some things cannot be smoothed over in a week. And a reconciliation that comes too fast is only a way of agreeing never to speak about the thing that broke. I loved my daughter too much to let us paper over what she had done. So I let the silence do its slow work, and I waited the same as I have waited for everything else in this story, patiently, without shouting. And then, on a Sunday in late summer, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Renata was standing on my porch, alone, no lawyer, no briefcase, no numbers, just my daughter, older looking than I remembered, with her hands empty at her sides. "Mama," she said, "I don't have any right to be here." But I didn't know where else to go. I looked at my child on my porch, in the warm evening light, and I did what a mother does. I opened the door wider. "The kettle's already on," I said. We sat at the kitchen table, at the table where her father died, and this time it was I who set out the good cups with the gold rims, my mother's cups, and I made her tea, and for a long while neither of us said anything at all. Then Renata cried, really cried, the ugly honest kind. "I told myself I was doing it for you," she said. "I really did. I told myself that story so well I believed it. But I was drowning, Mama, the shop, the debt, and I saw this house sitting here paid off, and I made you into a problem I needed to solve, so I wouldn't have to look at what I'd become." She looked up at me. "How could you have known? How did you know to get that evaluation, months before I even filed?" I told her the truth. "Because the day you sat in that chair and told me I was getting forgetful in that gentle voice, I heard your father's warning in my own head. He always said, 'Keep the record. Margaret, a thing without a record is only an argument.' And watching my own daughter decide I was a problem. And I decided I would keep a record of the truth, so that the truth would be there no matter how good the story against me got. I didn't do it to trap you, baby. I did it so that when you finally hit the wall, and I prayed it wouldn't be a courtroom. But you chose the courtroom. The wall you hit would be the truth. And not just your mother, who you could always talk around. You could have destroyed me at that first family meeting," Renata said. "You could have pulled that folder out right there in the front room and made me look like a monster in front of everybody. Why didn't you? Why did you let me stand up in a courtroom and say those things about you where it could never be taken back?" I thought about how to answer her honestly, because she deserved an honest answer, even if it was a hard one. Because a woman who talks her way out of a hard truth is a woman who never had to face it, I said. "If I'd stopped you at the front room, you'd have cried and hugged me and told yourself I was overreacting, and inside of a year you'd have found some other way to reach for this house, because you'd never have felt the floor of it. I needed you to hit the floor, Renata, not so it would hurt you, so it would be real. There are lessons that only take when the whole world is watching and there's no talking your way back up. I gave you the only lesson I had left to give, and know this, it cost me more than it cost you. I sat in that room and let you call me broken in front of strangers. And I did it on purpose, because I love you too much to keep handing you soft landings that teach you nothing." She put her hand over her mouth and cried again, and I sat with her while she did. "There's something else you should know," I said, "so you understand it wasn't a trap I sprung out of spite. That doctor on the stand, Dr. Whitfield, I could have had him write a letter and mail it to your lawyer the day I was served. Yvette wanted to do it the quiet way at first," she said. But I told her no. I said, "Let my daughter say her whole piece, every word. Don't cut her off, don't scare her off with a letter. Let her be fully heard. Because if I'm going to hold up a mirror to my own child, she has a right to have said everything she came to say first, so she can never claim I silenced her. You were heard, Renata. Every word you wanted to say, you said. And then the truth answered. That's not cruelty. That's the most respect I knew how to give you, and still stop you. Then I said the other thing, the thing I had decided months before on the porch swing. And I said it firmly, because mercy without boundaries is not mercy at all, it is only fear wearing mercy's coat. Here is how it is going to be, Renata, I said. I love you. You are always welcome at this table. But you tried to take my liberty, and that is not a small thing, and we do not get to pretend it didn't happen. So we are going to rebuild slowly, and we are going to rebuild on my terms. You will earn back my trust as trust is always earned in small, honest pieces over a long time. There will be Sunday dinners. There will not, for a good while, be talk of money, or the house, or my affairs. Those are mine, and they will stay mine, and I will thank you never to raise them again. And when I am truly gone one day, you will find that I have provided for all my children fairly, as your father and I always meant to. But you will not manage me while I am living, not you, not anyone. I will manage myself, in my own house, with my own name, until the good Lord decides otherwise. Can you accept that? Renata wiped her eyes. Yes, Mama, she said. Yes, thank you. And she meant it, and I believed her, and that belief was itself a small first honest piece of the rebuilding. She stayed for supper. She has come most Sundays since, and slowly, honestly, in small pieces, we are finding each other again. I will give you one of those Sundays, because it is how I know the repair is real and not just polite. A few months on, Renata was in my kitchen helping me put up peaches, and out of nowhere she stopped, with a jar in her hand, and she said, Mama, I got a job. A real one. Managing a shop for somebody else's money, somebody else's risk, and just my work to give. She said it almost shy. It's not the big thing I always wanted. But I slept 8 hours last night. First time in years. Your daddy used to say that, I told her. Rich is being able to sleep. You remember he told you that when you were a little girl? She laughed, wet-eyed. I didn't believe him. I thought he was just saying that because we were poor. We were never poor, baby, I said. We were paid for. There's a difference, and it took you 50 years and a courtroom to learn it. But you learned it, and that's more than a lot of folks ever do. And I handed her another peach. And we went back to the jars, 2 women in a kitchen full of afternoon light, and the penciled heights climbed the frame behind her. And one of those marks, a low one, was hers. Not long after, she asked me something I had been waiting for her to ask. Mama, the costs the judge assessed against me, the court fees, your lawyer, I want to pay them. All of it. On my own. It'll take me a while on what I make now. But I don't want you carrying $1 of what I put you through. That, I said, is the first time in your grown life you've asked to carry a cost instead of hand me one. You pay it slow, and you pay it honest, and every dollar of it, baby, is you buying back a piece of yourself. I'll take it gladly, and not for the money. My granddaughter Aaliyah came to me too one afternoon, and hugged me the right way this time. You told me to remember your face, Mama Margaret, she said. You told me you were well and to hold on to that. I held on to it. And I held my grandchild in my own kitchen, and I let myself finally cry the tears I had not let myself cry through the whole long fight. The pastor came by my house the week after the hearing, and he sat on my porch swing and would not quite meet my eyes at first. Margaret, he said, I owe you something. I sat in that front room the day they tried to talk you into signing yourself away, and I nearly let myself be used to do it. They brought me there to lend it the weight of the church. And I almost gave it. But you didn't, Pastor, I said. When it came down to it, you told the truth of what your own eyes saw. That's all any of us can do. I want to say something from the pulpit, he said. Not your name, not your business. But there are old women in my congregation, widows, sitting alone in paid-off houses, and their children are circling, and half of them have already been told they're too far gone to know their own mind. I want them to hear that they are allowed to keep their own name. Would you mind if I preached on it? Pastor, I said, you preach on it every Sunday from here to glory. If one woman in those pews keeps her own house because of something you say, then all of this was worth the price I paid for it. Word got around the neighborhood, as word does, The woman 2 doors down, older than me and living alone herself, caught my arm at the mailbox one afternoon, and her hands were shaking. "Is it true, Miss Margaret? Your girl tried to take your house, and you beat it? How? How did you do it, so I'll know if mine ever tries?" And I told her, plain, standing right there at the mailbox, get your own doctor, keep your own record, and never sign a thing you can't read twice with your own eyes. She wrote it down on the back of an envelope. An old woman writing on an envelope in the sun. And I thought, there it is. That's the whole reason a woman tells her story out loud. Dr. Whitfield still sees me every year. And every year now, when I sit down in his office, he says, "How's the sharpest patient in my practice?" And I say, "Still sharp." And we both laugh, because we know a thing together now that we did not know before. And Yvette Osai sends me a card every Christmas, and I send her a pound cake, because a woman who helps you keep your name should get a pound cake at the very least. And I still live in the house on Anson Street. I still cook Sunday dinners at the table where my husband died. The pencil marks are still on the doorframe, and I have still never painted over them, and I do not intend to. I sleep in my own bed, in my own paid-for house, an old woman with her name still her own, and the last word she never had to shout still hers as well. The manila folder is back in the top drawer of my bureau, under Walter's folded flag, and I have not needed it again, and I pray I never will. But it is there, because a woman keeps her record. Now, before I let you go, I want to speak plainly to whoever is out there listening tonight, and I will step back from my own story for a moment to do it, because the last thing I want to leave you with is bigger than me. There is a lie the world likes to tell about people who grow older. The lie says that once you are past a certain age, you become a problem to be solved by the people around you. A set of tasks, a set of risks, a house to be sold and accounts to be managed, and a body to be moved somewhere safe and out of the way. The world will hand your children this lie wrapped up in the language of love, and it will call it caring, and it will call it protecting. And some of the people who pick it up will even believe it, as my Renata believed it. But you are not a thing to be handled and stored away. You never were. You are a whole person, with a mind that belongs to you, and a life that is yours, and a name nobody else gets to hold. And none of that stops being true on any birthday. And no one, not a lawyer, not a judge, not a worried child in a courtroom gets to decide otherwise, unless it is genuinely, provably true. Love that is real does not petition a court to control the people it claims to cherish. Real love asks. Love that is real sits down at your kitchen table and says, "Help me, Mama. I am drowning," instead of deciding you are the thing that must be moved aside. If someone tells you they are only trying to protect you, watch their hands and not their mouth. Protection reaches toward you. Control reaches for what you have. They are not the same thing, and your heart knows the difference even when your fear tries to talk you out of it. And to the older women, especially the ones who feel the world beginning to talk over your head as if you were furniture in your own living room, keep your record. Not out of suspicion, out of dignity. Know your own accounts, keep your own calendar, see your own doctor, and look him in the eye. Say your no gently and say it clearly, and do not apologize for it. Because a no that protects a promise is one of the holiest things a person can say. You do not have to be loud. I was never once loud in this whole long story. I only had to be true, and to keep the truth where I could reach it, and to trust that if I stayed quiet and stayed dignified and let the truth take the stand in its own time, the truth would be enough. It was enough. It is almost always enough. In the end, if you have the patience to let it arrive. My husband Walter said it best, sitting on the edge of our bed with his glasses pushed up, all those years ago. He said, "You are nobody's burden to be handled, Margaret. You are the woman I chose." I have held on to those words through the loss of him and through the near loss of everything else. And I hand them to you now, whoever you are, wherever you are listening. You are not a burden anybody gets to manage away. You are a person, chosen and whole, and no one gets the last word on your life but you and the good Lord who made you. Thank you for staying with me through all of it. If this story reached something in you, do an old woman the kindness of pressing that like button and subscribe, because there are more of these to tell more women who were written off and were not finished at all. And tell me down in the comments, what would you have done in my place, sitting in that courtroom? Would you have shown the folder early, or would you have waited, as I did? And please, tell me one more time where in the world you are watching from, and what time it is where you are right now, because I truly do read them, every one, and there is no lonely hour that a stranger's kind word from across the world cannot warm a little. Take care of yourselves, keep your record, and do not ever let anyone convince you that you are a burden to be managed out of your own life. You are the one they chose. You always were.